Good Friday, and welcome to Espresso. With a disclaimer to anybody who is watching this live, I take full responsibility for this. I made a mistake and provided you guys with the wrong link.
Hey, it doesn't matter.
So watch it through YouTube.
There's only 2 people who can see that right now. Talk to the YouTube.
Okay. All right, you guys, today's conversation is going to be very radical and I'm really excited for it. Hey, we're real people just like you. We make mistakes. You know what? We own that shit when we do that.
They don't even know what you're talking about, though. So
okay. Okay. So anyways, today's conversation is going to be very special and I am really excited for it because you know why? Because we have courage. And we have an obligation to share with you the truth. And today we have a very special guest. Becca has been a part of the ENS Army for a little over a year now and even joined Team ENS 5 months ago as a program coach. Through her journey with the ENS Army, she dropped 53 pounds, 16 inches, and went from a size XL to a small. But her brain keeps getting bigger and bigger.
And her body went from an XL to a triple X, if you know what I mean.
Having been through the Rise Above, Inner Circle, Raw, and Underground Training Club, she represents our Canadian part of the ENS Army, wears lots of beanies. In Canada, you guys call it toques, says pop instead of soda, and has a funny way of saying certain words like process. Hey.
That's an Australian or like a Kiwi thing. Hey.
Canadians do that too in their own little Canadian way.
They say it without the H.
She loves herself a good dad joke, so I wouldn't even be surprised if she prepared one for today. And she is working on helping, and she loves a good dad joke and is working on helping the rest of the team love them too. You're doing a great job with that. She grew up in a faith-based home and was heavily involved in the church. After high school, she went on to study music and biblical studies at a Bible college and followed that working as a worship pastor for 6 years, where she became an ordained reverend. Coming out and marrying her wife, Jade, changed everything in her world, and she has been navigating through the space between faith and sexuality. Though we'll be talking about her body transformation, today we're going to be focusing a lot more on spirituality and sexuality. On today's episode, we'll have a radical conversation about, is it okay to be gay? And is it possible that you're still a child of God, even if you're gay? And I must also give credit to the finest, Lady Gaga, who says, don't be a drag, just be a queen, whether you're broke or evergreen, you're black, white, beige, Chola descent, you're Lebanese, you're Orient, whether life's disabilities lift you outcast, bullied, or teased, rejoice and love yourself today, because baby, you're born this way and you're in the motherfucking ENS Army. So let's go, let's grow, and let's welcome
and let's show
Becca Yarowski into the house. Let's go. Woo!
Okay, start us off with a dad joke. I know you got one.
Man, I used to be addicted to soap, but I'm clean now.
Damn.
She said that like didn't even think about it. She's like, I got one.
Stoked to have you here.
I'm stoked to be here. This is great.
Are you just ready to
rejoice and love yourself today? Because baby, you were born this way.
Let's do it.
Okay, so, like you've been around faith for a very long time. Let's begin by talking about kind of like your upbringing. around spirituality, and how did all of that come about before you pursued a profession, that had to do with that?
Yeah, I grew up, like I said, or like you had said, I grew up in the church. So my parents, both, my mom had grown up in a Christian home, her whole life, had kind of stepped away from that after she had kind of left home. And my dad, not so much. When I was born, they were still kind of young in their faith, together as a couple. And so a big part of our upbringing when it came to the church and what that looked like was, one, is it a place where they're going to teach like the Bible? And two, do they have a good kids program? And I think a lot of that came out of a place of my parents just wanting to give us every opportunity to learn as much as we could in things that maybe they didn't fully understand at that point themselves. And so we were really involved in the church to the point, we would be there, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Tuesday for kids club, and Wednesday for some kind of volunteer thing. And, we were there all the time. And I mean, a big part of it was community, right? And just connecting with other people. But in that, that was just our world. That was our life. We did everything there. And then as I got a little bit older and we realized that I could sing, it became this like, oh my gosh, she needs to be on stage all the time. And so, immediately after that, the worship pastor at our church kind of took me under his wing and started mentoring me in songwriting and mentoring me in leadership and all of those kind of things. And again, it just added another night that I was at the church doing something. And I was very, face forward in the church. I was up at the front all the time. Everyone knew my name. We were part of a fairly large church kind of in those years. And there was points where, I would be leading music in front of like thousands of people on a weekend. I didn't know half of them, but I felt a lot of pressure growing up in that and being in front of everybody to, live like perfectly. I felt like I had to be the example because everyone was watching me. All eyes were on me. And so I learned really quickly how to like put on the face and like act the act, but not fully. I think there was a part of me growing up that I always kind of knew I didn't fully know it for myself, And when I got to the end of high school, that was a place where I was like, okay, here's my moment. Like I can go do anything I want. I can be anything I want. I could go to any school. I had a lot of basketball scholarships on the table at that time. And in that space of all places, a Bible school reached out to me and offered me a basketball scholarship. And it just felt like the right next step, right? But I think a lot of that came out of, again, feeling that pressure, like I'm the good Christian kid. I do all the right things. So like, I got to go to Bible school. And I studied basketball there for 2 years.
Studied basketball?
I say that because, I was leaning into other things, but really like the majority of my time was spent in the gym. And, in those 2 years, I had a number of different leaders take me under their wing and mentor me and really like challenge me to start thinking about my faith for myself and not just for everybody else. And that was where I would say for myself, like I fell in love with Jesus. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I get it now. I get what this is about, and it's mine. It's something that I'm running with. And so then I stayed for my whole degree there. I finished a music degree with a biblical studies minor. And then the obvious direction from there was the church, working in the church. So I jumped back into the church in a leadership capacity and worked as a pastor for 6 years. So that's been kind of my, connection within the church and my growing up within the church and kind of how it all led me back to the church after that.
First of all, when you say studying basketball, I'm like, look at this Spalding. Fine lines and the texture of this ball. At any point in time, did you feel like there was something that like wasn't right about it, or were you like, no, this is what I want to do, or was it more just like this is the path I'm supposed to take?
By that, do you mean like with the faith, like there wasn't something right about it?
No, just each step along the way in what next decision you were making and where you were going or what you were going to be doing. Was there any part of it that didn't like feel like it was fully right, but you thought like, well, this is the next thing I'm supposed to do?
Oh, 100%. Like all through high school, I would say majority, the image that I love to use is the masquerade from the Phantom of the Opera. And in it, there's a line that says, masquerade, what is it? Masquerade, pretty faces on display. Masquerade, there's another mask behind you. And it goes on to say like that the world will never find you hidden behind those masks. And so for me, I became very aware in my high school years that every single place that I stepped into, I had a different mask. So whether it was on the basketball court, whether it was at the church, whether it was at youth group, whether it was at home, there was a different mask that I wore trying to appease everybody else. And in that, I think the part for me that I didn't feel was right was that I just had no clue who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no clue like what I was really doing in any of that, right? So when it came to my faith, like I'm up on stage leading music and reading scripture and telling people things, and I'm like, do I actually believe this? And that was a big struggle for me internally. But again, because I was at the front, I didn't want to show that I was wrestling so much, and I didn't feel like I had really anywhere to go to say like I'm wrestling, because there was nobody else with me there, right? Like I'd been put into this pedestal position and felt very alone in that space. And so I think, yeah, that was again the turning point for me going into college after that, was asking the question, like, who am I? What am I doing? My first 2 years of college, no one knew that I could play guitar. No one knew that I could sing. I was like, I don't want to be associated with this. I don't want people to know that this is a part of my life, because I don't want them to just put me back into that spot. I want to figure things out before I go back into that spot, if I ever do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm really excited for today's conversation. By the way, for those of you guys who are listening to this, full disclaimer that like we have never had this conversation before. So like all the questions that I'm asking Rebecca are literally like purely out of my heart, because I know what I believe and I also know what is being perceived, and I feel like the world is kind of like a masquerade.
I also am like the middle person, I feel, between you and you, because you have an experience she doesn't have. I have an experience she does have, but I also am in the same kind of like place with you and where you're at.
So. Sure. So, the reason why I'm really excited about today's conversation is because we're speaking with a spiritual leader who gets it from a metaphysical sense, but who's also, valued from an organized sense. And I believe that both of these thoughts of thought are different. So my question to you, from your own experience, having, like, been through that path, like grown up in the like organized path, but also having had the revelation that you had, right? Is there a difference, in your opinion, between organized religion and spirituality? And if so, what is it?
Oof.
That's a great question.
We'll get into your transformation too in a minute.
Yeah. Just get rolling. Is there a difference between organized religion and spirituality? Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is something really powerful in the organized church, in how it develops and grows and challenges people who are of faith. But I think the reality is that, and it's the danger of the organized church, is that a lot of people go and attend, and like I did going through high school, do all the right things, say all the right things, put their hands up at the right moments, and miss the relationship. They miss the actual like connection with God, and they'll go their whole life through that. And I think that's the dangerous part, where people start throwing around like hypocritical living from the church, because again, they're saying the right things, but they're not coming from a place of spirituality. And I think that there is so much power as well when it comes to spirituality. Yeah, my cats are crazy. There's so much power in just that, like building that relationship on its own, like between you and your creator, whether that's God, whether that's, depending on where you're coming from with your faith. But I think that there's absolutely a difference between the two. And I think it's even more powerful when the two are combined. So those would be kind of my thoughts on that.
I agree, but I wanted to ask, a qualified spiritual leader, because I'm not. So, you said that, okay, by the way, you grew up in a church. What kind of church? I know that there is like Catholic, Baptist, Protestant, like Christian, all the things. Which one specifically?
So again, like our family was just looking for a church that preached the Bible and had a good kids program. So we went to all sorts of churches. I would say, to give like a general term of it, like we grew up in the evangelical Christian church. But I would say like we were very non-denominational. We went to Baptist churches, Mennonite churches, Anglican, Pentecostal, did I say Baptist? Like we went to all sorts of different churches. Again, just depending on where we were living at the time and what kind of the church approach was to things. So it didn't really matter to my parents, like that we were always at a Baptist church or always at a Pentecostal church or whatever that might be.
So you've been around the spiritual setting since a very young age. With your family, it started with a sense of community.
Yeah.
And, just values. However, your relationship evolved, because I think you said when, like one of your mentors in college, brought you to that revelation. And that's when the real connection was made. Sounds to me like leading up to that, though you were, in the community, you weren't really in it. Like you weren't in it, but you were in it. There's a difference between physically being somewhere and being there experientially, body, mind, soul. Like, talk to us about that aha moment and, the evolution that came with regards to that.
Yeah. So again, like in college was I've always kind of naturally stepped into leadership positions. So when I was there, like as a freshman on the basketball team, they put me as the captain, which is like unheard of in college ball. But it just kind of was a natural step. And then at the end of my first year, they asked me to be a leader in the dorms. And I was like, what, like, why on earth, like, would, like, where I'm at from a spiritual sense, this is a Bible school. Like, I'm still wrestling through this. And they're like, no, like, we want you leading. And for me, I would say the aha moment, like, I, was going through the year and was wrestling through different questions and, even asking the question, like, is God even good? Like, if you read through the Old Testament, that like you see this God who's like sending like wrath down on people and like sending plagues and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, is that actually a God that like I want to love or serve? Like, who is this like God that we talk about? And is he even worth my time, And I wrestled through a lot of that in my first year, just asking so many questions. And the aha moment actually came. There was an evening I got a text from my dad, and he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer. And he had cancer before and beat it, and then got re-diagnosed with this new cancer. And my dad's my best friend. Like, we are two peas in a pod. We're just the closest. And so he sent me this, and it rocked me. And in that same moment, like, we had lost a basketball game the night before. That was my whole world, right? I was studying basketball, like everything was around that. And so, we'd had this upset with the basketball game, and then I find out like my favorite person in the whole world has cancer, and like I don't know anything about this type and like how long he'll be able to live, and just was wrestling through a whole lot of things. And I remember there was like this music night that they put on every week on Sunday nights, and so I had gone to it, and I just stood in the back and I just was crying because I was upset about my dad. And I'm standing there and I was like, man, like everything in my life is unpredictable. Like all of the things that I could say are the most sure things in my life, like my dad. I know my dad's always there for me. I know that he loves me. There's nothing changing there. But like he could be taken away tomorrow. Something that I spent all my time on, like basketball, like that is going to fail me time and time again. And I just remember in that space recognizing that like I had nothing sure in my life. And I opened my Bible and was reading a section. Actually, no, I didn't even do that. The person at the front was reading a section, and I was hearing her talk, and I was like, man, like this is the longest passage I've ever heard someone read at the front. I was not even paying attention to what she was saying. I was like, just stop talking. Like, this is so long. And then finally I was like, okay, maybe I need to listen. And in the moment that I listened, she read 2 verses, and it said, whom have I in heaven but you? Earth has nothing I desire besides you. My heart and my flesh might fail, but God is my portion and my stronghold forever. And I remember hearing that and being like, man, everything else could like fall apart. But from what I've learned so far in my journey with God, he has continued to be consistent. He's continued to be there and steady and constant. And I might not know all the answers. I might not know everything that I need to know, but I know that he's not going anywhere, and I know that that's consistent. And that was the turning point for me in my faith of being like, okay, I'm in. Like, yeah, I'm in for this, for everything, you know?
Okay, so I don't know which direction you're going with this, but
You go. I gotta grab my water.
okay, so
Where's my water? Oh, it's right here.
I went to a Bible college. You know this. We've had this conversation. I've shared stories before. Similar situation, and but I was not a leader in the church, but I went to church, and I kind of followed in the footsteps of other people. So a big thing in our community, because Sarit and I are married, so obviously label us whatever you want to. Frankly, I don't care. What I came to terms with at one point was that it's not a gender that I love, it's the soul inside the human. And this one happens to be the same gender as me. So whatever. However, that means that we draw a lot of people into our community who are gay, right? They're like, yeah, this is a safe place for me. Cool. So, we attract that. And the conversation has come up a lot where it's like, there's a lot of people, similar situation as you, grew up in the church, very conflicted, like this is wrong, but it feels like it's right. Like it feels like if I don't go this way, I'm doing something wrong against me. But if I don't follow what I feel, I'm going against what I'm going. It feels wrong against myself. But if I go with what I've been told,
okay. I want to do what I've been told, but
hold on. Erase all that. If I do and I follow and I abide by what I've been told, it feels wrong in my heart. Mm-hmm. But if I go with what feels right in my heart, I feel wrong by what I've been told. What the heck? Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And the big thing, like, I'll just be fully honest, is like heaven or hell, right? People are like,
100%.
If I'm gay, I'm going to hell. Like, that's as blunt as I can put it. And it's like, it's wrong to be gay. If I'm gay, I'm a sinner, I'm going to hell. And I could repent from my sins, but that means that I would have to not be gay. So I'm supposed to pray the gay away and like hope that it doesn't keep coming back. So I would love to notice like what your thoughts are, because similar position, and each person has their own way of thinking through this stuff. Each person has the right to their own spirituality and how they feel that it is best for them. But I think it will be really valuable to know what your thought process is through this.
Yeah. So the very first time that I recognized that I was attracted to the same sex, I was like 10. And I remember thinking it. I was outside playing basketball, and I remember thinking about this one person and being like, man, I think I like her more than a friend. And then I was like, am I allowed to like her more than a friend? And I just I never saw anyone around me in that capacity, right? Like there wasn't it wasn't talked about, and it wasn't seen. Like I didn't know any same-sex couples, like male or female. I didn't know, I'd never seen that before. And so I just in that space was like, oh, like this, am I allowed to feel this way? Am I not? But because I didn't see it, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just something that maybe I just need to not talk about it. It wasn't that I felt like it was wrong. I didn't, at that point within the church, the church didn't talk about it either. So, I didn't feel like it was something that was wrong. I just because I didn't see it, I thought, okay, well, I just have to maybe ignore it and just kind of go with the status quo. Again, a pattern that I was living out in a lot of my life. And so I didn't really say anything. And then when I got into kind of junior high, that was when the big conversation started coming up, of course, because the internet was making its debut. And
Debut.
The big ass Apple computers with the floppy disk.
Turn on your computer. And so of course, like the big conversation at that point, especially in our youth groups, was around pornography. And again, I didn't have any context for what I was feeling, but I knew that there was some kind of connection between what I was experiencing, feeling attracted to someone else, because that was like a sexual thing. I was like, okay, well, I guess the only conversation that we're having that I'm hearing that's related to sex is about pornography. And if that's bad, that the church is saying these things about it, then like, I guess this is bad too. Like that was my correlation. Again, no one was telling me like yay or nay. It was just, I was trying to figure it out, but no one was talking about it. No one was saying anything. And so again, I just kind of kept it to myself. Like if we were at a, sleepover and the girls were talking about some guy that was really cute, like I just went along with it. Oh yeah, he's really cute. Oh my gosh. And I just went with it.
When they were all talking about the Backstreet Boys and you're like, why am I thinking about Britney Spears? That was totally me.
Yeah. And it just like, I just went with the flow, and it was easy to stay busy because I was so involved in the church and because I was so busy with sports and academics. I just kind of busied myself in that, and I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to date because I was busy, and the first encounter that I had with actually talking through that conversation was in college. There was a student got up on this one day. We had a day each semester called a day of prayer, and it was just the whole student body all together for the entire day. Like there was different sermons that were given, and there was space to reflect, and there was music and all sorts of stuff. And there was an open mic time, and somebody had said in that space that they had felt like God had released them from being gay. And that was my very first encounter with it. And I was like, I didn't even realize I was supposed to be praying this away. Like I had no idea, but then of course that opened up a massive conversation within the school and the student body. And around that same time, there was a few like big name music people within the church music world that came out as well. And again, the conversation just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then it became this like my side, your side, you're going to hell. And it was very messy. And, people started having to go to like ex-gay ministries where like they'd have to, go through programs to try and like drive the gay out of them. And at that point I was like, well, like I'm not saying anything. Like this is gonna stay very deep and no one will know. And so then at that point I was like, well, probably a good way for no one to know is for me to date. And if I date a guy, no one will know and it's all good. And so I did. And I had so much anxiety in that because I knew that it wasn't fair to him. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I could not marry anybody that I was not being fair to in that way and not being able to give all of myself to. So that didn't work. And At that point I was working in the church, and I'd have these little old ladies after church telling me that they're praying for my husband for me. And I'm like, well, I don't know how that's going to work, but thanks. And I just thought, okay, I guess I just have to be single the rest of my life. That was kind of what I had resigned myself to. And then one of my roles in the church was working as a youth pastor. And one of my kids came out to me. And that rocked me, because I had gone to like different training sessions, and I had read different books, and I knew all the things that I was supposed to say in that moment. And when she came out to me, I sat there and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say any of the things that I had been told I needed to say because I didn't believe them. But I didn't feel like I had enough to stand on to say why I didn't believe them. I just knew that I couldn't. There was a breaking point there for her. Like, how I responded shaped how she would continue or not continue her relationship with God.
Yeah.
And that was a powerful moment for me of recognizing, one, that I needed to know more about it and I needed to study it and I needed to figure it out, not just for my sake, but for hers and for any other kid that I ever talked to. But in that moment, I just had to resign myself to just say, you know what, I don't actually know. Like, I don't actually know all of what the Bible says on this. And I'm going to just be honest with you on that. But I do know that I love you. And I do know that I want to lead you as best as I can. So like, if you want, like, let's learn about this together. Like, let's walk through it together. Let's figure it out. Like, let's see what the Bible says. And so that was the beginning of the journey for me, was starting to ask the questions. And we had a sign at our church one day that said, yeah, everyone welcome. And we had a lesbian couple come, and they said, oh, are we, like, does that mean us? And someone had responded back to them saying, well, yeah, of course you're welcome. Like, anybody walking, in any space of sin is welcome in our church. And we're happy to walk with you through that to help lead you out of that. And I was like, no, like, I can't, like, I just couldn't reconcile the God that I knew and what I was hearing. And so for me, it began this journey of trying to study it and learn it and figure out where I did land. So
I have to read some of these because it's just crazy to me. Like, but no person, I think, like, I'm not faulting a person, but it's what we learn and it's what we believe, which is called faith. We are believing, so we're choosing to believe something and have faith that that thing is true, right? So pastor in church when I was growing up and discovering myself said there will never be a cure for AIDS because it's God's way of punishing gay people. I just, like, I read it and I'm like, man. Same thing with, like, we will accept anybody who's living in any kind of sin and help you walk out of that, like as if you being genuinely authentically you is wrong. Okay, so can I ask a question?
Of course. By the way, are you guys if you're finding value in this conversation, drop a heart.
This is, like, not a traditional kind of conversation,
but it's an important one.
Yeah, it relates very much to our community. Now, what made you finally, like, decide I'm stepping into what I believe, and how do you feel okay with that, knowing that, like, kind of how you grew up, like, and what you learned and what was told to you all the time was that was wrong and you're bad because of that? How did you justify, I guess, or rationalize with yourself, like, this is the direction I'm going to go?
Yeah. So for me, it was a journey of studying and listening and discerning and not doing that alone. So a big thing that I started with is I reached out to 3 really close friends, and I shared my story with them. And those were the hardest conversations that I've ever had in my entire life, right? Like it's that coming out moment. But even then, I wasn't really coming out because I was like, I don't actually know where I land, and like, but this is where I'm at. This is what I'm walking in, and this is where I'm struggling, and I don't know where I'm at. But it was important for me to bring in other people to the conversation, because I knew that wherever I got to in what I studied, I didn't want to make a decision based out of fear, and I didn't want to make a decision based off of feelings. So
you wanted to marry the two and figure out where you landed.
Right. I didn't want to be in a place where, my decision was based simply because everyone had told me my whole life, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And so my decision was based just because of fear of people and fear of what they would think and fear of how they would treat me. But I also didn't want to make it based off of feelings, because feelings fail us. And I didn't want to just make it from like a selfish, like, well, I feel this way and I want to be with this person. So like my decision on what I've discovered is just simply based off of the way I feel. And so bringing in people into that journey with me, I was intentional about choosing people that I was close with and I felt safe with. But even in that, the people that I had reached out to, one of them I knew absolutely would take a very conservative approach and would be like, yeah, no, you're going to hell. And like, I knew that would be her standpoint, from start to finish. And another person that I reached out to, I knew was very liberal and would just be on the other end of the spectrum. And then a third person that I reached out to was somebody who I actually didn't know where they would land. And I felt like they would probably just journey it the same way I would journey it, without the emotion. Mm-hmm. And so then from there, I just started finding books. I started studying the passages in the Bible that talk about it. And I just poured myself into studying it and trying to figure out what everything meant. And for me, I got to what I would call like the end of studying, because you could just keep studying it forever. But I got to this place where I just felt like I was just in a cycle at that point. I was reading the same things over and over, for and against. And I got to a place where I was like, man, I actually I can see where a conservative approach will interpret it this way. Mm-hmm. And I can also see where a more liberal approach will interpret it a different way. And then I thought, well, this sucks. Like, I am no further than I was when I started. And I've read all of these things, and now I'm just more confused. And I don't feel like there's any real clear answer for me. And for me, that put me in this space of so much tension within, because I just thought, what am I supposed to do from here? Does this just mean that I have to be on my own for the rest of my life? And I had a moment this one evening. I was sitting and journaling, and I just basically cried out to God and was just like, I can't live like this. I can't live in this tension anymore. I can't live. And I'm not saying that I need to have all the answers, but I need something. I need something here. And in that moment, I was reminded of something that has been kind of the foundation of my entire faith. And I've always, again, being in Bible school and being in the church, especially in leadership, there's this tendency in leadership and in Bible school to want to debate everything and what did the Bible say about this and that? And I hate debating. And I just like that always drove me nuts. And I was like, at the end of the day, for me, my faith has always just been like, but really, doesn't it just come down to loving God and loving people? Like, if we could figure that out as as people who believe, the world would be drastically different. But like, read it in the Bible, see it nowadays, and everything in between. We suck at those two things. Like, we are not good at those two things. And I think that's why God made it so easy. Two things, not this massive, like, checklist that we need to do, but just love me, love people. And in that moment, as I was reflecting on that, I took a step back from everything that I had studied and I started looking at it in context. And it was like I had been so buried in the book that I forgot the bigger picture. And when I looked at the bigger picture, I recognized that he was calling me to love him and love people. And if I started to look at any of the questions I had about the different passages that it talked about, if I started looking at it from that context, I could understand that the different passages were not condemning me. They were not saying that I was sinful in it. They were teaching things that had, context of, male sexual practices, but not in the context of like a committed consensual relationship. And when I started asking the question, am I loving God and am I loving people? And can I love God and love people from a committed consensual relationship? It just shifted the whole way that I looked at everything. And that was where I just all of a sudden had just this overwhelming amount of peace. And it scared the living daylights out of me, because at that point I was working in a church and I knew that I didn't land in the same way that the church did. Yeah. And I knew that I couldn't stand on stage and preach one thing and believe a different thing. I just, from an integrity standpoint, that I couldn't do that. Yeah. So yeah, that was where I came to that realization and had to start making some changes.
I remember having a conversation with you before you joined the inner circle, and we've readdressed that we've had this conversation a couple times, but I never found out if during that conversation, if that was part of the time that you were going through this, I guess, studying of, and like, I wonder that, because I'm like, was I somebody that you asked that was in that moment? Because now I'm like backtracking in time and I'm like, when was this? Like, was that when, because you asked me, you said, hey, when I heard the story on Espresso of this, and you said that, and you went to Bible college, and then you had this thing, and then, like, for me, I had this thing with a girl. One of my first experiences that I was like, what was that? Was literally in the dorm room, and it was a codependent relationship, which it was, but that was not. And I felt like it was a justification for them to be like, no, you're not gay. You can't be gay. It's just a codependent relationship. And so we need to counsel you through this. Like, that was right. My thing. I got counseled because of my gayness. And so I'm wondering though, was that like before or after or during?
That was after.
Okay.
So yeah, I had gone through that journey still while I was working at the church, and again came to a place of recognizing, okay, now I know where I'm landing now, but I know that doesn't align with the church that I'm working at, and I can't stay here with integrity. I can't lead with integrity, knowing where I land. And so then, yeah, I stepped away. I stepped down from my position in the church. And it wasn't solely based just on that. There was other things that I was stepping down for as well. But I stepped away from my position in the church. I had zero idea what I was doing next. I had no job. My very last day of work at the church, I had no job, no savings, no nothing. Like I had no clue what I was going to do, but I knew that I needed to be faithful to where I had landed. And I found a job with a company doing sales, and had never done sales before, but I was like, hey, what the heck? Why not? So I stepped into that, and I moved up in that company, and then moved with that company. And then when I had moved, that was where I had come across you guys.
Okay.
And I guess just prior to that, I had come out publicly too. I had come out to everyone close to me, family, close friends, that kind of thing. But because I had grown up in the church, like my entire social media was Christian people. That was it. Like my whole world was church and Christian, you know?
Right.
So I felt like if I wanted to be in a relationship, be able to be married, be able to, like, I didn't want to live hidden. And so I came out publicly on social media, and that was just a whole journey in its own. But it
Can you real quick, like cliff notes of what that experience was like? Like what was the common?
I was overwhelmed with how loving and supportive so many people were. I think that there's more people than people know out there that actually land one way that you wouldn't expect. There's a lot of people that I didn't expect to be so supportive that were. And then there was some people that I thought were my close people that would love me through it, that shamed me and judged me and threw rocks at me, essentially, right? And so it was very difficult to walk through. It was overwhelming with the love, but it was very difficult to walk through a lot of the comments and conversations.
Yeah, but that's freedom when you go
Yeah.
through. This is really interesting. I know we probably can talk about this forever. I don't know who Facebook user is, but my question, like, who wrote the words, or essentially who wrote the book, right? Like, what was their perspective? So I'm thinking through that, and I'm like, well, it was written by a lot of people, I guess, messages from God transcribed through a human perspective onto a piece of paper, right? Ultimately, that's what happened. Any of these books we have here on this shelf were all written by different people with different perspectives and different journeys and different views of life.
Yeah.
But we choose to believe it or not, all the same. So I think there's such a power in knowing yourself and understanding is what's within me feel right and feel like good integrity. And again, going back to, am I loving God? Am I loving people? I would even add, am I loving myself? Or if we're made, for the people who are like, well, we're made in his image, well, then you are a piece of that, right? Are you loving yourself?
Yeah.
And how are you loving yourself? Are you being true to what you know to be right in you?
Yeah.
Right? So, like, all these things considered, I don't, anybody, if you don't know who Sadhguru is, for those listening, he is, one time I was listening to one of his audiobooks, and he's like, it was either Sadhguru or Napoleon Hill. I don't remember, but one of them, one of my great uncles said, it was the question of, like, who's going to hell? And he basically said, if you're alive and you're already living in hell, you're already there. If you're not being true to yourself, if you are not sticking up for what you feel is right for you, and you're hiding, or you feel miserable because you're not listening to yourself and going by what you fully believe to be your truth, you're already in hell. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
You're just alive in it. And who knows what even happens? Zero of us know what actually happens
Yeah.
when our body leaves.
I think it comes back to the question that you asked earlier, Sarit, of like the difference between organized church and spirituality. And I think, you know, there's so much in the Bible that we don't fully know or understand, you know, and we might not ever have a concrete answer in our lifetime.
Right.
But I think that there is something very significant about recognizing that we were given a mind for a reason.
Mm.
And it was meant to be used to think and discern and to listen. And so, you know, for me, at the end of the day, like if I when I die and, you know, I stand before my creator, I can only approach him with doing the best that I can with what I've got, you know? And so for me going through that whole journey, it was like, man, like at the end of the day, like I might be wrong. Like I may have not figured it out, you know? I don't believe so. I feel very confident in where I've landed, but at the same time, you know, I think at the end of it, like I used my mind to the best of the ability that I could to bring in other people for confirmation, or, you know, for them to challenge me on things and to listen to him. And when it comes to that spirituality, like to just be constantly engaged in my faith in a way that I'm listening to how he's leading me too, right? Because again, like we don't always understand what the Bible is saying. It can be confusing at times. You know, we can read all sorts of books and they might give us other ideas. We could listen to a song and it might impact us. We can have mentors speak into our life and have all of these different things. But like if we miss the relationship, if we miss listening to like how we're being led, and like you said, like that integrity within, like I feel like that's a bigger piece to the puzzle, right? Of finding myself in front of my creator one day saying, you know what, like I took in all these resources, I did all of this studying, I asked all the questions, but at the end of the day, like my focus is still just on loving you and loving people, and listening as best as I can and discerning as best as I can. But I'm still human. At a point, there's a place where I'm not going to get everything right. Same as some mega church pastor's not going to get everything right, you know?
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Can I share with you what is my thought about the difference between organized religion and spirituality?
Yeah.
I believe that organized religion tells you what to think. And spirituality is being a lifelong student of how to think.
Mm.
And I'm grateful for this conversation because you've walked both paths. And, you know, when there is some kind of recognition from an organized place, then people take your message differently. So based on your knowingness of you and, you know, everything that you've experienced professionally and personally within this realm, do you believe that being gay is a sin?
No.
What would you tell someone who thought who was taught their entire life by organized religion that they are a sinner, even though every day when they wake up, they feel a certain way and they're just so scared?
I would say, oh, that's a big question. I would say
How would you encourage them to move forward?
yeah. I you know what? Like I would encourage them to find someone who is safe. Like find a friend, find, you know, if you're like listening to this, you're maybe part of our community, right? You know, find somebody safe in our community, find someone, you know, in your world, in your space that is safe, and just ask the hard questions and be open to wherever that might lead you. But be willing to ask those hard questions and just explore it. I think one of the dangers in the church again is this: we feel like we need to be perfect. We feel like we need to, you know, and it happens every Sunday. Everyone gets all their kids all dressed perfect and they all are, you know, screaming at each other in the car, and they get into the building and it's like everything's perfect. We're all a happy family. And it's dangerous because there's not space in that to be real and to be human and to mess up and to figure things out and to ask hard questions.
Yeah.
So if you're living in a space where you are in this tension where the church is telling you one thing and you're experiencing something else, start by just being real, finding someone safe, being honest, and just start asking hard questions.
So good. How do you keep on serving God on a day-to-day basis, considering that you're no longer, you know, actively, you know, a minister in your church?
Yeah, that has been, you know, a whole new learning curve for me. I mean, a part of it is just continuing to lean into that relationship in a one-on-one capacity. But I don't think we were ever created to be on our own. You know, like as humans, we're created for people. We're created to engage with people. And so part of that serving, you know, is in my relationship with my wife, and, you know, in loving and serving her as best as I can. Part of that is in how I, you know, step into my work and serve and love people in that space. And then, you know, beyond that, you know, whether it's relationships with friends or connecting into community, you know, just whatever that might look like, it's an outpouring of the relationship that I have with him in the one-on-one, just kind of bleeds out into everything else.
I love it. You know, for anybody who maybe doesn't know what it is that you do within ENS, can you just share a little bit about your role?
Yeah, so I'm a program coach.
Wait, I'm like, you know what you are? You are a inspiration specialist.
My role name just changed. Yeah, I'm a program coach, and I have the opportunity of getting to talk to people when they first come into the community, whether they've clicked on an ad and just found us that way, or they, you know, just joined the Facebook page or whatever, and just connecting in, getting to know them, hearing their stories, hearing where they're at and what they've been walking through, and then, you know, helping lead and guide and direct to whatever way we can help serve them best, you know. And obviously we've got all sorts of different ways that we do that, whether it's, you know, the Rise Above or Raw or Inner Circle or, you know, working through the burn zones, whatever that might be, but just helping find the best place for them so that they're able to have the most success here.
Do you believe that the desire to improve oneself, be it physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, anything, is an act that gets one closer to God?
100%. I think that I actually had a conversation with someone a little while ago about this, that, you know, we're not, in the same way that we're not just what we eat or just what we do for exercise, like we are so much more than that. The same is true in kind of the bigger picture of we're not just our body, we're not just our mind, we're not just our spirit. We are all of those things combined. And if we, you know, if we are leaning into, you know, growing and developing our body physically, that is going to impact our mind and our spirit. If we're, you know, leaning into our mind, it's going to impact our body, right? Like all of them work together for us as a whole. So as we lean into anything that we're doing, it's going to impact all of it together. So I definitely believe that it grows us in our relationship with God, or again, whatever path that you know, believe.
I'm asking this question for myself. How have these teachings helped you to get closer to God?
What teachings?
ENS teachings.
I would say, as I have grown in the things that I've learned in this community, it's changed my life. Like it has given me more confidence. It's given me more understanding of who I am. And as I understand that more, I grow in my relationship with God, because I'm in a space of like, man, like this is who you created me to be. Like these are the things you created me for. This is, when we talk about being great, it's not like an ego thing. It's not like, oh, look at how great I am. It's like, man, like look at the potential that I was born with and created with that I can step into. And like that was how I was made. This is what I was designed for. So as I'm growing in these things, I'm stepping into the fullness of who I was created to be. So it's all interchangeable. It all is working together. It's not this and that.
Because you are a body, a mind, and a spirit.
Totally.
So good. Okay, where can the audience find you, get a hold of you, so that you can serve them?
Yeah. So I'm, of course, in all of our, you know, Facebook community pages, Becca Jaworski. You can see it on the screen there. It's easiest usually just to type in Becca Y, because my last name can sometimes be hard to spell. So you can find me that way. If you're looking for me by email, Erin's got it, becca@erinandsarit.com. And yeah, those would be kind of the best ways to reach out and find me.
What do you love most about having conversations with people one-on-one in our community?
Oh man, I love hearing people's stories, like where they've been and what they've walked through. And I love that, because like the things that people share, like that's their heart. Those are the things that are close to them. Those are the things that matter most, whether it's their kids, whether, you know, like the reason we step into wanting to lose weight is because of the things that matter most to us, right? We want to lose that weight because we want to be there for our grandkids, or we want to, you know, live a more fulfilled life and be able to engage more with our friendships. We want to, you know, feel better about ourselves so that we can not hide in the house and actually get out and do things. And, you know, I love hearing what brings people alive and what brings passion for them. And what I love about what I get to do is I get to then say, okay, like, let's do this. Like, let's go. Like, let's take that step and find a way for you to be able to step into that fullness of who you are and what you were created for.
Can I get an amen?
Hallelujah.
I love it. For those of you guys who are listening to this conversation live, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you guys who are listening to this recording, thank you for sticking around. We know that this is not an easy conversation to digest because guess what? It's, what's the word? Radical?
I don't know. It's deep. We don't know everything. That's the bottom line. We don't know everything.
Yeah. But we definitely know what we believe in, and we are willing to get stoned for it if that need be. So, for anybody who's listening to the recording of this, and if you know somebody whose life will improve by listening to this conversation because it will provide them more peace. Spiritual torment, I believe, is the greatest form of torture. I've been on both sides of the curve, and you were not brought to this universe to be spiritually tortured. And if you feel like you're being spiritually tortured, the only one who can cure that is truly you. And, you know, questioning how you think can dramatically change that, and immersing yourself in an environment that, you know, thinks like you, that accepts you for who you are rather than tells you how, you know, like compromised or cursed or sinful you are. We ain't got time for negativity. So if you're listening to the recording of this and you know that this can help to improve somebody's life, or maybe even save somebody's life from spiritual torment, then please do us a favor and share this conversation with them. This is exactly why we chose to do this video, because there have been numerous conversations with people within our community who have been struggling with this. And that is not okay. It is not okay. You are not alive to be experiencing this.
You're not alive to live in hell.
It is not okay. God does not want that for you. So thank you for listening, and thank you for paying this forward by helping to improve somebody's life. And thank you, Becca, for having the courage to speak about what you know to be true.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being who you are.
All right, guys. Until next time, have a beautiful day, night, weekend, week, wherever you're at watching this video, and we will catch you next time. Bye.